ability of agencies to promulgate regulations. This is good government legislation. We do not need more regulation. We need better regulations, which is exactly what H.R. 527 will achieve. And I urge support and final passage of this bill, and thank the gentleman from Texas again for having yielded, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I'm pleased to yield to the ranking member of the Courts, Commercial Law, and Administrative Subcommittee, Steve Cohen of Tennessee, 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the ranking member for the time. This bill amends the Regulatory Flexibility Act of 1980, and what it does is requires agencies to engage in so much analysis and so much new procedures that it basically befuddles the agencies to bring forth any rules in the future. It is elimination by burdensome regulation, and while it doesn't say they're eliminating rules, that's the effect of it. It subjects all major rules and other rules that have significant economic impact on a substantial number of small entities to review by small business review panels. The cumulative effect of this and other changes in H.R. 527 will be to undermine the ability of agencies to effectively regulate consumer health and product safety, environmental protection, workplace safety, and financial services industries' misconduct, among other critical concerns. You know, we talk about small businesses, and small businesses are important and they create more jobs than any other sector in our economy. But small businesses are made up of human beings, and human beings also, all human beings, even if they're small businesses, to paraphrase Mitt Romney, who said corporations, they are people. Small businesses, they are people too. And small businesses are concerned about consumer health and safety because they are the victims of it, the product safety, and environmental protection, and workplace safety, and food and drug safety, and certainly financial services misconduct that almost brought this country to its knees in what could have been a depression but for the work of our great President and the Congress that worked with him at that time. This bill does little to help small businesses shape or comply with federal regulations. Right now, we can take for granted that the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the places we work, the planes we fly on, the cars we drive, and the bank accounts where we put our savings are going to be safe because we have strong regulation. But if enacted this H.R. 527, it'll be harder, much more difficult, maybe impossible to provide those protections for future generations. H.R. 527 is based on the well-intentioned but false premise that regulations result in economically stifling costs. In particular, proponents of H.R. 527 and of anti-regulatory legislation generally, of which we've seen an abundance in this Congress, repeatedly cite a thoroughly debunked study by economists Mark and Nicole Crane, which made the ridiculous claim that federal regulations impose a $1.75 trillion cost to the economy. Ridiculous? Why, you say? Because they even admitted, and the Congressional Research Service said, it failed to account for any benefits of regulation. There are indeed benefits of regulation, and great ones. And the Office of Management of Budget said benefits outweigh costs. Moreover, the study was never intended to be a decision-making tool for lawmakers or federal regulatory agencies to use in choosing the right level of regulation. But they still use that as the basis for this law. So let's focus on the real facts. H.R. 527 will bring agency rulemaking to a halt because of multiple bureaucratic layers of review and analysis that it adds to the rulemaking process. It is de facto end of regulations. As Sherwood Boehlert, a colleague of mine here in Congress of the previous Congresses from the state of New York, and a Republican, and a longtime chair of the House Sciences Committee recently warned, this measure ignores history, Newt Gingrich ignores history, larding the system with additional reviews based on previous efforts that have slowed progress while helping nobody. Second, the bill clearly presents a serious threat to public health and safety for all Americans. It does this by eliminating the emergency authority that currently allows agencies to waive or delay certain analysis so they can expeditiously respond to national crises, such as a massive oil spill, or a nationwide outbreak of food poisoning, or an emergent financial marketplace meltdown. We've experienced all of these. The priority is to end emergencies and to have the emergencies agencies to say, sorry, we can't do this. We have to conduct regulatory analysis first before we aid the American people. 527 is simply chock full of crafty provisions to slow down rulemaking, requiring small business advocacy review panels to analyze rules promulgated by all agencies, and not just those from the 3 agencies for which review panels are currently required. Moreover, it would require review panels for all major rules, not just those that have a significant economic impact on a substantial number of small entities. And this bill would force agencies to engage in seemingly endless, wasteful, and speculative analysis, including an assessment of all reasonably foreseeable indirect economic effects of a proposed rule. I think we may see agencies purchasing crystal balls so they can comply with this inane requirement of looking into the future. As any first-year law student would know, it can take years of costly and time-consuming litigation to figure out exactly what is reasonably foreseeable and what is indirect. Where is Mr. Paul's graph? While adding analytical requirements and opportunities for industry to disrupt rulemaking, H.R. 527 provides absolutely no assistance to business in complying with federal regulations, which is what small business really needs. And for those of us who should really be worried about the national deficit, this bill has a hefty price tag. The most conservative estimate is $80 million, and a more realistic estimate is $291 million over a 5-year period. H.R. 527, like H.R. 3010, the other anti-regulatory bill. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, may I have another 2 minutes?
Of course.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
Thank you. H.R. 527, like 3010, which we'll consider today or this week, is simply a wolf in sheep's clothing. What proponents seem to describe as common sense revisions to current law actually would result in a dramatic overhaul of the rulemaking process, threatening agencies' ability to ensure basic health, safety, and other precautions. I oppose this bill and urge my colleagues to do so also. The cumulative effect of these and other bills would be to undermine the ability of agencies to effectively regulate consumer health, work product safety, environmental protection, financial services misconduct, and others. Right now we can take these for granted. This is a dangerous bill, and I would ask our members to vote against it and to think about the safety of the public in the future. Small businesses are people, as Mr. Romney said about corporations, and those people also suffer from the lack of regulation. I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shavit, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank our distinguished chairman for yielding the time. Mr. Chairman, when I talk to small business owners back in my district in Cincinnati and southwest Ohio, I continue to hear the same thing over and over again. Overbearing regulations are crushing their ability to grow and create jobs. And that's what we're supposed to be about, is getting this economy moving and getting people back to work again. But the regulations are just crushing them. Over the last year, however, the Obama administration has enacted more than 3,500 new rules and regulations, and they have another 4,000 pending. So rather than reduce the regulations, they're talking about putting on even more. Mr. Chairman, small businesses in this country are struggling. Unemployment is at record levels, and our economy is showing little or no signs of improvement. We must pass legislation that reduces red tape and repeals burdensome regulations. This bill will reform the rulemaking system and provide much-needed regulatory relief to the small businesses. If President Obama is serious about job creation, then he must sign this bill. Small businesses are struggling to keep up with the overwhelming cost of compliance that his administration has put on our nation's job creators. If Congress wants to give the American people a gift this Christmas season, let it be regulatory relief and the jobs that will result. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I'm pleased to yield to a distinguished member of our committee, Judy Chu from California. I yield her 1 minute.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise in opposition to the so-called Regulatory Flexibility Act. This bill shows just how out of touch the House leadership is, not only with the American people, but with America's small businesses. A recent poll conducted by the Hartford Financial Group asked small businesses to name their biggest barrier to success. Despite the majority's claim, do you know how many cited government rules and regulations as the biggest barrier? Just 9%. Instead, a vast majority, in fact, 59% of small businesses said they struggle the most with finding qualified talent. So it's clear that this bill does nothing to knock down barriers and help the majority of small businesses with their greatest needs. Instead, it just slows down the regulation process and stops government from protecting consumers from unsafe products, dirty air or water that could make them sick, a dangerous workplace, or gross misconduct in the financial industry. Our country's small businesses don't have time for this nonsense. We should be working on a bill that creates jobs and actually helps small business.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, a former district judge and a senior member of the Judiciary Committee.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, when I meet with small business owners back in southeast Texas, the one thing they always tell me is that they are not comfortable with expanding their businesses or hiring new employees because of the federal regulators. We just don't know what the federal government's going to do next, is what I often hear. And considering that the Code of Federal Regulations is currently over 150,000 pages long, no wonder they are saying that they cannot plan for the future. Mr. Chairman, do we really need more than 150,000 pages of regulations to be scattered across the fruited plain? Good thing the regulators weren't around to draw up regulations on the Ten Commandments. No telling what that would look like. Anyway, a recent Gallup poll found regulation and red tape is the most important problem currently facing small business owners. That's right, not the economy, but red tape. Why are we allowing the regulators to administratively pass many unnecessary rules that destroy this economic system? Unnecessary regulations hurt all American businesses, but it hurts the small businesses the most. It's not easy for a mom-and-pop shop to hire a legal department to navigate through the ever-growing list of federal regulations that may be applicable to their small business. In fact, on average, small businesses spend 36% more per employee per year complying with federal regulations than large businesses do. This legislation will help the problem by requiring that federal agencies just analyze the impact of a new regulation on small business before adopting the regulation. Once a mom-and-pop shop go out of business, there's often no going back. Regulators and elitist bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. do not always know what is best for people who own a small business. Many of these regulators have never owned a small business or even understand capitalism. They have never signed the front of a paycheck, but yet they make rules. Congress needs to ensure that we do not over-regulate America to death and self-destruct our economic system. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Members of the House, it's important for us to realize who else has a difficulty in supporting a bill that ends up creating unsafe products, promotes dirty air, and other kinds of harms to our citizenry. The American Lung Association is opposed to H.R. 527. The Environmental Defense Fund is opposed to this bill. The National Women's Law Center does not support this bill. Public Citizen is opposed to it. The Union of Concerned Scientists are opposed to it. And indeed, a total of more than 70 organizations have all written urging us to very carefully consider what we're doing here today. It's absolutely critical, and it's very important that we understand that there is no evidence, credible evidence, that regulations depress job creation. Now this is great rhetoric, but we're passing laws here today. and the majority's own witness before the House Judiciary Committee agrees with us. Christopher DeMuth, who appeared before the House Judiciary Committee on behalf of the American Enterprise Institute, stated in his prepared testimony that the focus on jobs can lead to confusion in regulatory debates, and that the employment effects of regulation, while important, are indeterminate. He can't figure it out, and he was a pretty good witness for our position that regulations have no discernible impact on job creation. If anything, regulations may promote job growth and put Americans back to work. And one alliance, the Blue-Green Alliance, notes, and I quote, "Studies on the direct impact of regulations on job growth have found that most regulations result in modest job growth or have no effect. And economic growth has consistently surged forward in concert with these health and safety protections." The Clean Air Act is a perfect example. The economy has grown 204%, and the private sector job creation has expanded 86% since it was passed in 1970. And so, my colleagues, regulation and economic growth can go hand in hand. And we've recently observed that 40 years of success with the Clean Air Act has demonstrated that strong environmental protections and strong economic growth go hand in hand. What's in this bill is a provision that every regulation change would have to come back through the Congress. It would be unthinkable that we could add this to our schedule, especially if there was a health emergency that required a rapid passage. And so I want every member of this House to examine the grossly different analysis that are being made here and come to your own conclusion. I think if you do, you'll realize that regulations have no discernible impact on job creation. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, how much time remains on each side?
The gentleman from Texas has 7.5 minutes. The gentleman from Michigan has 3.5 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Manzullo, who is a member of the Financial Services Committee.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. This is one of the most important bills that we pass in Congress. You know, I'm just amazed at what I hear from the other side. We're over here endangering safety. We're poisoning water. We're doing everything we can in the workplace. That's not what this bill is about. All this bill says is that when you put in a regulation, at least have some type of basis so that the people impacted by it know where to go from there. Have some good sound science. Let's have an economic impact study. Let me just give you 5 instances. Specifically, talk to the doctors today about all the regulations impacting them, and you'll hear the complaints about spending more time on paperwork than with their patients. Talk to the banks. I was talking to a small banker, only 19 employees. 2 little banks in my district, they have to hire a full-time compliance officer just because of Dodd-Frank. And that bank didn't do one thing wrong to bring about this economic collapse. And now the farmers. EPA is going to regulate cow manure under CERCLA as opposed to the present rules. And then several years ago, this House passed something, the Clean Air Amendments of 1990, Clean Air Act Amendments of 1990. One of those was something called the employee commute option that said that counties around Chicago had to have something called an employee commute option. There was forced carpooling. And one of those counties was McHenry County, which is still a rural county. And I had to work with Henry Waxman for 2.5 years to come up with a reasonable interpretation and correcting language in order to make sure that the people of that county were not strapped with that incredible mandate, and at the same time we did not compromise the quality of the air. The Hope Scholarship, reporting requirement that said that the 7,700 schools across the country had to report who it was that gave them the money, turned them into some kind of a supercomputer. And I worked with the 7,700 schools and with the commissioner of the IRS. This was a $100 million mandate upon all these schools in the country because nobody took the time to say, what impact will this regulation have upon the schools of this country? This before me is 1 day of regulation. Just 1 day in America. Just 1 day in Washington. Just one more day when the small business people have to read through 500 pages of 9-point type dealing with air particulates. And then I hear today that, oh, you don't need any relief. It's not necessary. Regulations are good. And then we take a look at the impact that this has, the financial impact that it has on the small businesses today. This is a great bill. It's long overdue. And as a former chairman of the Small Business Committee, I say it's about time, and our colleagues on the other side should all vote unanimously for this bill. Thank you.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I'm glad my friend is still on the floor, because he asked about what do the doctors have to say about this. The doctors support the bill, and I'd like to call off the American Lung Association, the Center for Science in the Public Interest do not agree with you, and they agree with our position on the bill. In just a minute, I'll be very pleased to. The Environmental Defense Fund, the Friends of the Earth, the Union of Concerned Scientists are all in agreement with us. And so I want you to know that the medical people that have spoken about this bill are not in support of it. And I will yield briefly to you.
Well, thank you for yielding. First of all, the doctors that I talk to, the experts themselves, not the lobbyists in Washington, I talk to them on a continuous basis. They're very upset with more regulations, and NFIB is behind the bill.
These are not lobbyists. These are organizations that do not, well, I don't know if they have any offices here, but the Union of Concerned Scientists probably don't have any lobbyists.
Will the gentleman
I doubt
yield?
if the American Lung Association does.
Will the gentleman yield?
I would, except that your side has far more time than my side does. And I would yield back the balance of my time. I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, we are prepared to close, and so I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume, and say that I, too, am prepared to close on this side. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we have two starkly opposing views of what this bill does. I have over 70 organizations that are from the labor movement, from the health movement, from the science world, from the Women's Law Center, from the Union of Concerned Scientists, all telling us that this is a very dangerous process that we're involved in, that the results wouldn't be that the authors of this amendment intended to harm people, or that they intended to produce unsafe air products, or that they were supporting making the air unbreathable. But that is the result of this bill. It's been stated twice on the other side that we have accusing you of bad intent. I don't do that, and I want you to be very clear. It's not a matter that your intentions are not honorable, but the results of a bill like 527 would create unsafe products. It would ultimately produce air that is more polluted than the air that we're dealing with now. It would delay the promulgation of regulations that we need. It is exactly going in the wrong way, because we, as a matter of fact, need to have more regulations surrounding products, particularly children's toys. We want the air to be much better than it is. And so I urge my colleagues to examine the premises, starkly different, that have been presented here today, to join us in turning back and sending back to the committee a bill that would make our health much more endangered.
The gentleman's time's expired.
And
Gentleman from Texas is recognized. The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, job creation is the key to economic recovery, and small businesses are America's main job creators. But over-regulation kills jobs and is especially burdensome for small businesses. Anyone who doesn't believe that probably hasn't spent much time in the private sector. Even President Obama, who has not spent much time in the private sector, wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed and recognized that over-regulation, quote, stifles innovation, end quote, and has, quote, a chilling effect on growth and jobs, end quote. It has been 15 years since Congress last updated the Regulatory Flexibility Act of 1980. Experience during that time reveals that further reforms are necessary. The Regulatory Flexibility Improvements Act of 2011 makes carefully targeted reforms to the current law to ensure that agencies properly analyze how a new regulation will affect small businesses before adopting that regulation. In the current economic climate, with millions of Americans looking for work, we simply cannot afford to overburden small businesses with more wasteful or inefficient regulations. I urge my colleagues to support the bill. Look forward to its passage. And yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd yield myself such time as I consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.R. 527, the Regulatory Flexibility Act of 2011. And I was an original co-sponsor and want to thank Chairman Smith for the opportunity to work with him on this very important piece of legislation. Opponents will argue that the bill stops agencies from issuing regulations. However, in reality, H.R. 527 will force agencies to consider how their actions affect small businesses and other small entities. More importantly, if the effects are significant, agencies, not small entities, will have to develop less burdensome and costly alternatives. Shouldn't a government understand the consequences of its regulations? Of course it should. And by doing so, the government may arrive at a more efficient and less costly way to regulate. In a nutshell, that is what H.R. 527 does. Some may argue that agencies already do this when they draft regulations. However, nearly 30 years of experience with the Regulatory Flexibility Act, or the RFA, shows that agencies are not considering the consequences of their actions, and it is about time that they start doing that. Government regulations do have consequences. Small businesses must expend scarce and vital capital complying with these rules. If there's a better way to achieve what an agency wants while imposing lower costs on small businesses, the sensible approach would be to adopt the lower cost methodology. This will enable small businesses to meet the requirements imposed by regulators while freeing up scarce resources to expand their businesses and hire more workers. H.R. 527 ensures the consideration of consequences of rulemaking through the removal of loopholes that the agencies have used to avoid compliance with the RFA. In addition, the bill will require a closer consideration of the impact of rules on small businesses and other small entities. Yet nothing in H.R. 527 will prevent an agency from issuing a rule. It just stops the government from issuing a rule without understanding its effect on America's business creators, or America's job creators, small businesses. With that, I'd urge my colleagues to to support this very carefully crafted measure to improve the federal regulatory process, and with that, I will reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Reducing the cost of regulation is a very important issue, but it's not going to turn the economy around. In order for this to happen, businesses need to see more customers coming through their doors, and not just during the holiday season we are now in. With this in mind, it is necessary to create an environment where regulations are not overburdening small businesses, as they do, in fact, bear the largest burden. These entrepreneurs face an annual regulatory cost of $10,585 per employee, which is 36% higher than the regulatory cost facing large firms. And this brings us to the bill before us. Too often on the House floor, legislation is painted as either being totally perfect or completely awful. With this bill, neither of these characterizations is appropriate. In fact, on many fronts, H.R. 527 contains several very positive provisions and will make a real difference for small businesses. Many of the provisions were previously advanced by Democrats in the Small Business Committee. And for this, Chairman Graves and Chairman Smith and their staff should be commended. For instance, the bill makes agencies' regulatory flex analysis more detailed so that they cannot simply overlook their obligations to small businesses. It also gives real teeth to periodic regulatory lookbacks, which requires agencies to review outdated regulations that remain on the books. Agencies will also be required to evaluate the entire impact of their regulations, something that is long overdue. And it cannot go without mention that the bill brings the IRS under the purview of the RFA. This is a real improvement for small firms who will undoubtedly benefit from greater scrutiny of complex and burdensome tax rules. These are all constructive changes that will bring real relief to entrepreneurs. With that said, there are other items in this legislation that leaves you scratching your head. Adding 50 new agencies to the panel process is a recipe for disaster. Such a dramatic change will require new bureaucratic processes, more staff, and more paperwork. It must be ironic for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that this bill attempts to to reduce federal regulation by dramatically expanding the role and scope of government. In fact, H.R. 527 creates more government as a means to limit government. How does that make sense? It also applies red flags to land management plans, something I have never heard small business complain about in my 18 years on the committee. Doing so will enable corporate interests to more readily challenge land use decisions, which could have adverse consequences for the environmental stewardship of public lands. The reality is that RFA was just not intended to cover this action, and it should not do so going forward. Finally, it is important to note that the Office of Advocacy's footprint has traditionally been minimal, with a budget of $9 million and 46 employees. According to CBO, its budget will have to increase by up to 200% per year to handle the new responsibility of H.R. 527. It is already taxed in meeting its current role, and expanding its powers geometrically is well beyond its capacity. Members are well aware of the fiscal constraints facing the U.S. government. Now is not the time to make costly statutory leaps when smaller steps might be more appropriate. So, in conclusion, there are some good and some not so good things in this bill. I want to acknowledge the efforts by the bill's manager, but in the end, it is not something I could support given the imposition of too many questionable policies. However, I want to thank Chairman Graves for being open to discussion, and I look forward to continuing our dialogue on this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would yield such time as he may consume to the gentleman from New York's 24th District, Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Chairman.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 527, the Regulatory Flexibility Improvements Act. The small businesses I meet on a regular basis tell me that regulation has become an overwhelming problem. Small business owners are the backbone of the American economy. I know this because I'm a small business owner. Like so many, my life was built by a belief in hard work, free enterprise, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a love to get out of bed in the morning and just do what I love to do, as you know yourself, Mr. Speaker. The preponderance of regulation is stifling that spirit. This country can't do well unless small businesses do well. They provide the jobs, the growth, the opportunity for the rest of society. Small businesses are drowning in regulation. Federal agencies should periodically review their rules to ensure that regulations are not unduly burdensome. As with the 1099 reporting provision and the 3% withholding rule, the law of unintended consequences can be crippling. Fortunately, this House has repealed both. We all agree that regulations are absolutely necessary to protect the public good, but we need to ensure that regulations reflect a proper balance that does not unreasonably hinder entrepreneurship, job creation, and innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Do you want that?
Yeah. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the chairman, the ranking member on the judiciary.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady from New York. My friend on the other side, who is managing the bill from Missouri, I was happy to hear you say that this measure that we are examining does nothing to hinder the rulemaking process. And I'd like to help you out in that area, if I may, because this expands in the bill the use of small business review panels to include rules promulgated by all agencies and to include all major rules. I would say to the gentleman from Missouri that right now there are only three rules, there are only 3 agencies that are affected. What this does, my friend, is extend the review process to every agency. Do you recognize, sir, that there are over 50 agencies in the federal system? And so for it to be thought that this is going to change much is a grievous mistake. And of course I am here to help you out to the extent that I can. The other thing that it does, and you think that this will not change the rulemaking process, is that this measure would force agencies to engage in speculative analysis, including an assessment of all reasonably foreseeable indirect economic effects of a proposed rule.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would yield such time as he may consume to the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, Mr. Kaufman from Colorado 6th.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks. The Obama administration is currently choking the lifeblood out of our nation's middle-class small businesses and entrepreneurs through excessive regulation. According to the Small Business Administration, regulations cost the American economy $1.75 trillion annually. The Obama administration has issued 200 such regulations that are expected to cost our economy at least $100 million each. And 7 of these regulations have a price tag of over $1 billion. The President has long touted the job creation of a so-called stimulus, but every $1 million increase in the federal regulatory budget costs 420 private sector jobs for hardworking Americans. This is why I am urging passage of House Resolution 527, the Regulatory Flexibility Improvements Act of 2011. This legislation will give real teeth to the Regulatory Flexibility Act of 1980, which mandated that federal agencies first assess the economic impact of their regulations on small businesses before going forward with them. It is time to put small businesses first. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman,
from New York is recognized.
May I inquire as to how much time each side has?
Gentleman has 3 minutes.
On the other side?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I'm going to yield myself 1 minute. And I want to do this because I need to set the record straight regarding the previous member who just spoke about how many regulations have been issued under the Obama administration. Let me remind people here that according to the conservative Heritage Foundation, net regulatory burdens increased in the years George W. Bush assumed the presidency. Between 2008 and 2001 and 2008, the federal government imposed almost $30 billion in new regulatory costs on Americans. About $11 billion was imposed in fiscal year 2007 alone. With regard to the number of pages of regulations, the Code of Federal Regulations total 145,000 pages in 2007 alone. The Obama administration issued an executive order 13563 and a memorandum on small businesses and job creation. And the executive order instruct agencies to seek the views of affected entities prior to proposed rulemaking. The executive order also calls on agencies to engage in periodic reviews of existing regulation. So 15 seconds more. If we're going to come here and instead of dealing with the issues that are impacting small businesses, and that is access to affordable capital so that they could create jobs, but rather come and criticize the Obama administration for issuing regulation, let's set the record straight and talk about the regulations that were issued under the Republican administration. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Does the gentlelady have any more speakers, or?
I do have one more.
I'd reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
How much time do I have left, please?
1 3/4 minutes.
I will yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, it is clear when I have the ranking member of the Small Business Committee that has an enormous history of commitment to small businesses and the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, both former chairs, opposing this bill, then we obviously know that it is problematic. What I know of small businesses is that they frankly want to have an anchor to promote and propel their business needs. The regulatory scheme and the underlying premise of this bill is to eliminate any anchor for our small businesses. And when you do that, you're clearly undermining their growth and opportunity. I would add as well that I challenge as to whether or not this debate today creates any opportunity for a small business, provides them access to credit, guarantees any loans, creates any jobs. Absolutely not. And it is absurd that we would suggest that agencies that are trying to promote small businesses are stopping small businesses, and therefore we want to implode the regulatory scheme. The APA provides an opportunity for due process through the court system. If our colleagues have problems with regulations, they can run to the courts. You don't have to implode the process to be able to address the problem. Let's help small businesses. Let's discuss how to create jobs, and let's vote against this legislation. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized. The gentleman from New York is recognized for 3/4 minute.
Since its enactment in 1980, the Reg Flex has reduced the burden of federal rules on small businesses. It has evolved over time to include new tools, expanding its purview, and making a real difference for entrepreneurs across the country. With this important role in mind, the legislation before us makes some essential changes. However, in other areas, the bill goes too far. At a time of mounting deficits and growing taxpayer anger at how tone-deaf Congress has become, H.R. 527 will dramatically expand the federal bureaucracy at a cost of $80 million. And for this reason, I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady from my colleague from the Small Business Committee pointed out that the Bush administration added $60 billion in regulatory burdens out there, which is not a good thing at all. In fact, that scares me in and of itself. In 8 years of the Bush administration, you had $60 billion in extra regulations. The Obama administration has added $40 billion in only 3 years. So on the rate that that administration is on, it's going to far outweigh any administration. But my point is, I don't care what administration it is. I don't care if it's a Republican administration or a Democrat administration. I want to make darn sure that those agencies comply with the Regulatory Flexibility Act, and I want to make darn sure that those agencies take into account how much this is going to cost small business when they're implementing some of these ridiculous regulations that they're asking small business staff to comply with. Some of this stuff is outrageous, and it needs to be studied, or it needs to be taken care of, or it needs to be stopped. But these agencies, and again, I don't care what administration it is, they need to have to comply with this, and they need to understand what the consequences are. And with that, I would urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I'd yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendments in the nature of a substitute recommended by the committees on the Judiciary and Small Business printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee print dated November 18, 2011. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. No amendment to that amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part A of House Report 112-296. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-296, offered by Mr. Kritz of Pennsylvania.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kritz, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Trade is critical to the growth of small business. 250,000 U.S. companies export to foreign markets, the large majority of them small and medium-sized enterprises that employ 500 or fewer workers. In fact, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, more than 230,000 small and medium enterprises now account for nearly 30% of U.S. merchandise exports. The number of such companies exporting has more than doubled since 1992, and according to SBA, 96% of the world's customers live outside the U.S., representing 2/3 of the world's purchasing power. Given this critical role, we need to make sure trade agreements assist small businesses. Trade agreements should help reduce red tape and increase transparency, but too often small businesses lack the resources and foreign business partners available to large companies to navigate through opaque customs and legal systems to reach their customers. Numerous fees and other non-tariff barriers to large multinationals can be deal breakers for small companies. Trade agreements must streamline rules, reduce non-tariff barriers, and provide arbitration procedures so that even small U.S. exporters can successfully participate in foreign markets. Trade agreements must also open up opportunities for small U.S. exporters to compete for foreign government contracts. U.S. companies should be given a fair shake at the important government procurement market in these foreign countries. Such agreements can help to lower the threshold at which contracts must be put out for competitive bid, ensuring that even small U.S. companies can be part of the process. Some of those contracts for roads, schools, clinics, distance learning, and medical equipment, for example, can be ideally suited to smaller U.S. companies. My amendment makes sure that small businesses are not forgotten when trade agreements are implemented. It requires that agencies' regulatory flexibility analysis assess the cumulative impact of any rule stemming from the implementation of a free trade agreement. Doing so will make certain that small firms' voices are part of the process in these important deliberations. Being part of the process will enable small firms to benefit from trade agreements and use them as a means to access foreign markets and customers. I urge members to vote yes on this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment, even though I do not oppose the amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I support this amendment. The amendment aims to require an agency to account for rules implementing the free trade agreements when the agency considers the cumulative impact of a proposed rule. I support free trade because I believe it is in the best interest of American business, workers, and consumers alike. The gentleman from Pennsylvania and I may differ on this issue, but in the context of this amendment, that is beside the point. It can't hurt to make sure that agencies consider the impact of rules implementing the free trade agreements in their regulatory cumulative impact calculations. I don't think the analysis will show that free trade destroys American small businesses. Quite the opposite is true, in fact. But that isn't a reason not to do the analysis. We should know how these kinds of regulations contribute to the cumulative regulatory burden on small businesses. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I do support this amendment and hope to have the gentleman from Pennsylvania support for the bill on final passage. And I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I rise only to urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 112-296. For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-296, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentleman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas.
Thank the chair. Mr. Chairman, I'm rise today to call upon the rational and reasonable thinking of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and really discuss an amendment that speaks the obvious. The underlying bill puts into process a regulatory scheme that delays the implementation of regulations. Whether you agree or disagree with that approach, we all recognize that securing the homeland continues to be a top priority for this nation. I'm standing alongside of some of our first responders looking over one of the nation's major ports. Many who live in those areas recognize the vulnerability of America through her ports, or aviation, or mass transit, or highways, or bridges, or dams. Every moment after 9/11 is a new moment in this nation. And my amendment simply says to waive the provisions of this bill, H.R. 527, when it deals with Homeland Security. I hold in my hand the National Security Threat List that lists the issues that our Homeland Security Department and intelligence communities have to address. The listing is not classified, so I'll mention the many tasks that they have to address: terrorism, espionage, proliferation, the moving forward on the question of economic espionage, targeting the national information structure, cybersecurity. Why would we want to interfere with the movement of regulations to protect the homeland under the premise of this bill? I ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee amendment that would waive its provisions in light of protecting the homeland. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
For the purpose of the gentleman from Texas, right?
Mr. Chairman, I oppose this amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close, so I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Texas? Gentlelady from Texas still has 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, let me again appeal to the bipartisanship of my colleagues. This is a very troublesome bill, and this bill interferes with the normal process, if you will, of dealing with the regulatory scheme. Although it's called the Regulatory Flexibility Act, I can assure you that the purpose of this legislation is, one, not to create jobs, and certainly not to help us secure the homeland. The bill would add new rate review requirements to an already long and complicated process, allowing special interest lobbyists to second-guess the work of respected scientists and staff through legal challenges, sparking a wave of litigation. This is what Homeland Security regulations would have to go through. Since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security in 2002, and since my membership on the committee, that was the Select Committee, we have overhauled the government in ways never done before. Steps have been taken to ensure that the communication failures that led to 9/11 are corrected. More than 220 million tons of cargo moved, for example, through the Port of Houston in 2010. That cargo has to be inspected, and the port ranked first in foreign waterborne tonnage for the 15th consecutive year. Just imagine a regulation dealing with the scanning or the security of that tonnage to be interfered with by H.R. 527. If Coast Guard intelligence had evidence of a potential attack on the Port of Houston and they wanted the Department of Homeland Security to address it, or they used a regulation, or there was a regulation in process, then it would have to be stopped by this legislation. It is important to recognize that Homeland Security is not security by appointment. It is not security by, let me address regulations by having them vetted by H.R. 527. This is a common-sense amendment that simply says, as it deals with the Homeland Security or the securing of our nation, as we look to be better than what occurred in 9/11, where agencies were not communicating with each other, where the fault of the cybersecurity system did not work, and we had the heinous tragedy of losing 3,000 plus of our souls in New York City. As we see the franchising of terrorism, where there is the shoe bomber and the Christmas Day bomber and the Times Square bomber, it's important not to have a fettered Homeland Security Department in a regulatory process that is stopped by overlying legislation. This legislation is a job killer, we already know. Let's not let it be a killer of Americans, because it gets in the way of Homeland Security efforts doing the work that is necessary. I ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee amendment that asks simply for a waiver of this legislation as it addresses the question of securing the homeland and the regulatory scheme that is needed by intelligence agencies, our border patrol agencies, our TSOs that deal with aviation security, our cargo inspectors. As it relates to that work, our front line, let us waive this legislation. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman.